The earliest cuneiform tablets found in the ancient ruins of Eridu and Uruk show a civilization trying to understand memories of beings who lived before written history began. These clay pieces, some dating to about 3200 BC, mention beings described as those who watched from the heights of heaven and had knowledge that changed early human villages into advanced cities. The tablets from Eridu, which the Sumerians themselves believed was the first city ever built, talk about divine teachers who came down during the time when the earth was young and the waters had not yet separated. Archaeologists digging at Eridu have found 17 different building levels, and the deepest layers show building knowledge that seems to have appeared fully formed, instead of developing slowly over time. The cuneiform texts from these levels describe beings called Galu, which literally means great water beings who taught humans irrigation, metalworking, and city planning. These tablets say that these watchers set up the basic rules of civilization during what scholars call the Ubaid period, roughly 55,003,800 BC. The Uruk tablets give more details about these very ancient teachers. One especially well-preserved tablet, listed as WW200307 in the Verdur-Sayedisches Museum, describes 7 main watchers, and each one ruled over a certain area of knowledge. The text says these beings opened the eyes of the black-headed people, the Sumerian name for humanity, and gave them the divine rules that controlled every part of civilization. The tablet clearly says these watchers could see across the waters of time and could notice events that had not yet happened. The Sumerian king list, written around 2100 BC but based on much older sources, gives the most detailed story of the Apkallu and their connection to antediluvian rulers. This document, saved in several copies, including the well-Blundell prism kept at the Ishmaelian Museum, describes a time before the Great Flood when kings ruled for unbelievably long times, some for tens of thousands of years. The text clearly names 7 Apkallu, or sages, who advised these early kings. The first sage, Adapa, is described in the king list as he who completed the plans of heaven and earth. Mesopotamian writings describe Adapa as having such deep wisdom that he accidentally broke the south wind's wing, which made Anu, the sky god, call him to heaven for judgment. The text shows that Adapa's knowledge was so complete that he understood the basic structure of reality itself, including the correct rituals for keeping cosmic order. The second sage, Uana, appears in many Mesopotamian sources as the founder of the priesthood and the inventor of writing. Berossus, a Babylonian priest and historian writing in the 3rd century BC, describes Uana as an amphibious being who came out of the Persian Gulf to teach humanity the basics of civilization. According to Berossus, Uana looked like a fish, but could take human form, and his teachings included math, astronomy, and the correct way to build temples. The remaining 5 Apkallu in Meduga, in Megalama, in Mebaluga, in Lildu, and Uchuabsu each added knowledge in special areas that became important to Mesopotamian civilization. The king list says these beings worked together with human rulers to build the first cities, create the earliest law codes, and develop the sky observations that later shaped calendar systems across the ancient world. Language study of the Sumerian and Akkadian words for these watchers shows a complicated growth of ideas that later affected Hebrew and Aramaic traditions. The Sumerian word Dindur originally meant any divine being, but in the earliest texts, it clearly refers to beings who kept constant watch over human actions. The Akkadian word Agi carries the idea of beings who see from above, and it appears in places that suggest these beings could watch many locations at the same time. The way these words changed through Semitic languages shows that the watcher idea stayed alive across cultures and thousands of years. The Hebrew word meaning watcher, which appears in the Book of Daniel, comes from an Aramaic root that can be traced back to the Akkadian Agi. This steady language connection suggests that the idea of divine watchers was not only a myth, but a continuing tradition of contact with non-human intelligences that lasted for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence from Tel Asawin in central Iraq gives physical support for the existence of advanced knowledge systems that are older than known civilizations. Excavations done between 1964 and 1968 by Iraqi archaeologist Fouad Safer uncovered a settlement dating to about 6000 BC that showed a strong understanding of astronomy, math, and engineering. The site has the earliest known examples of irrigation canals designed using exact mathematical rules, suggesting access to advanced water control knowledge. The pottery found at Tel Asawin shows decorative patterns that match extremely precise astronomical observations. Study of these patterns by archaeoastronomer Alexander Thom showed that the ancient people had detailed knowledge of planet movements, moon cycles, and star positions that mainstream civilization would not rediscover for thousands of years. The mathematical relationships hidden in these decorations suggest they understood ideas that modern scholars consider advanced math principles. Similar evidence appears at the pre-Sumerian site of Jarmo in the Zagros Mountains, where excavations have shown building layouts that follow amazingly advanced geometric rules. The buildings at Jarmo, dating to about 7000 BC, use proportional relationships that match ones found much later in Greek and Egyptian sacred buildings. The accuracy of these proportions suggests access to mathematical knowledge far beyond what should have been possible for a Neolithic farming community. The cuneiform tablets from Nineveh, part of Ashurbanipal's library, keep copies of much older texts that describe how this advanced knowledge was passed down. One tablet, labeled K3657 in the British Museum collection, clearly says that the Watchers brought down from heaven the me of all crafts, and built the foundation of learning before the waters rose. The text says this transfer of knowledge happened during a specific time when the stars were in different houses, suggesting an astronomy-based dating system that places these events far in the past. The Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, even though it was written much later, keeps traditions about very ancient beings who knew the structure of the cosmos. The epic describes beings called the Anunnaki who fixed destinies and set the rules of heaven and earth. These beings are shown as having existed before the current cosmic order began, and as having the power to control basic forces of nature. Recent study of cuneiform math texts from the Old Babylonian period has shown calculation methods that seem to come from much older sources. The Plumpton 322 tablet, dating to about 1800 BC, contains trigonometric calculations that show knowledge of math relationships not officially rediscovered until the Greek period. The advanced nature of these calculations suggests knowledge was passed down from the pre-flood period described in the Sumerian king list. The consistency of these stories across many independent sources suggests that the sudden rise of city planning in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC is a break in human development that traditional archaeology has trouble explaining. The cuneiform texts themselves say this knowledge came from the Watchers, giving a historical way to understand this fast progress. The meaning of these discoveries goes beyond academic curiosity. The accuracy of the astronomical knowledge kept in pre-Sumerian sites suggests observation abilities that would have needed advanced tools or other ways of collecting data. The mathematical ideas built into early Mesopotamian buildings show understanding of geometric relationships that modern engineers see as best answers to complex building problems. The administrative system that controlled both sky and earth areas becomes clear through close study of the Anunnaki pantheon, showing a complex hierarchy that reached far beyond Mesopotamia's borders. The three main figures who led this divine council Anu, Enlil, and Enki set up territorial divisions that would shape human civilization for thousands of years. Their areas of power, recorded in Sumerian administrative texts from Nippur and Babylon, show an organized approach to planetary rule that treated Earth like a colonial outpost that needed careful management. Anu, whose name comes from the Sumerian and meaning sky, held the highest position in the Anunnaki hierarchy. The Babylonian text called the Enumeration of Anu describes his realm as the highest heaven, from which he issued the main decrees that controlled cosmic order. Archaeological evidence from the Anu ziggurat at Uruk shows building features meant to help communication between earthly priests and heavenly authorities. The structure includes acoustic chambers that amplify sound in certain frequencies. Mesopotamian boundary stones called Kedur give clear details about Anu's earthly domain. These stones, dating from the Kassite period but keeping much older traditions, say that Anu's direct power reached over the northern parts of Mesopotamia, especially the area around modern Turkey and the Caucasus Mountains. The Kedur texts describe this land as the place where the Watchers first came down, and they say that certain mountain peaks stayed forbidden for human settlement because celestial beings still lived there. Enlil's domain included the atmosphere and the central regions of Mesopotamia, with his main earthly seat at Nippur. The Sumerian hymn to Enlil, preserved on tablets from the Earth III period, describes his authority over weather patterns, farming cycles, and the movement of air masses across the planet. The text says Enlil had technological abilities that let him change atmospheric conditions on a regional scale, including making storms, controlling rainfall, and changing wind patterns to help or destroy human settlements. Excavations at Nippur have found a set of underground chambers under the Enlil temple that go much deeper than needed for normal religious uses. These underground structures, found by the University of Pennsylvania expedition between 1889 and 1900, include advanced ventilation systems that keep air moving constantly, even though they were sealed for thousands of years. The chamber walls show carved images of mechanical devices that look like weather monitoring equipment, suggesting that Enlil's weather control depended on advanced technology instead of supernatural power. Enlil's territorial authority stretched across the fertile plains of central Mesopotamia, including Babylon, Kish, and Sippar. Administrative tablets from these cities show a coordinated farming system that maximized harvests by carefully timing planting and harvesting. The level of coordination needed suggests central control over farming plans across huge areas, with local officials receiving detailed instructions about best farming practices based on atmospheric and astronomical conditions. Enki's domain covered the underground realm and the southern regions of Mesopotamia, especially the marshlands near the Persian Gulf. Known as Lord of the Earth and Master of the Abzu, the freshwater ocean under the earth, Enki's duties included managing groundwater, mining minerals, and what the texts call the shaping of the clay people. The Sumerian text called Enki and the World Order gives detailed descriptions of his technological abilities, including purifying water, pulling metals from ore, and changing genetic material. The city of Eridu, considered Enki's main earthly home, contains archaeological evidence of advanced water engineering that is thousands of years older than known technology. The site shows a complex system of channels and reservoirs that controlled water flow with mathematical precision. The calculations needed for this system show understanding of fluid dynamics that would not be formally recognized until the Renaissance. The territorial division set by these three main Anunnaki leaders created a checks and balances system that stopped any one being from taking total control of human development. The Mesopotamian text called the Dialogue between Enlil and Enki describes ongoing arguments between these leaders about how humans should be treated. Enlil supported strict control and periodic population reduction, while Enki supported slow education and technological progress. These differences in belief led to separate human groups living under different management systems. The Tablets of Destinies, called Mupis plus MT in Akkadian, were the main way divine authority was given and maintained. These tablets, described in many Mesopotamian sources as holding the basic laws of reality itself, worked as both official documents and technological devices. The Epic of Anzu gives the clearest account of these tablets, describing them as objects that gave their holder control over natural forces and the power to issue binding decrees that affected both divine and human worlds. The physical descriptions of the Tablets of Destinies in cuneiform sources suggest they were not normal clay tablets, but advanced devices made of unknown materials. The text says they shone like stars and spoke with thunder voices when activated. The tablets apparently needed special knowledge to use, because the Epic of Anzu tells of the chaos that happened when the bird demon Anzu stole them without knowing how to use them correctly. The transfer of authority through the Tablets of Destinies followed set rules that kept government steady while allowing leadership changes. The Babylonian text when Anu the Sublime describes ceremonies where authority was officially passed from celestial beings to human intermediaries. These rituals involved humans physically handling the tablets, suggesting the devices were designed to recognize and respond to certain people who were genetically or technologically prepared for the job. Archaeological evidence from the throne room at Mary supports these authority transfer ceremonies. Excavations by André Perry between 1933 and 1955 found a chamber with a raised platform and metal inlays arranged in geometric designs that match descriptions of tablet activation ceremonies. The platform shows signs of extreme heat, meaning the ceremonies involve powerful energy discharge. The human intermediaries who received authority through the Tablets of Destinies were not normal rulers, but people who had special preparation that increased their abilities. The Sumerian king list describes these enhanced rulers as living for thousands of years and having powers beyond normal human limits. The text says this preparation involved direct action by the Anunnaki, who modified chosen individuals to serve as effective links between divine and human realms. The genetic manipulation described in Sumerian creation myths is one of the most debated parts of ancient Mesopotamian writings. The Atrahasis epic, written around 1700 BC but preserving much older traditions, gives clear descriptions of how the Anunnaki created modified humans to work and manage. The text describes mixing divine essence with earthly clay to make beings with higher intelligence and longer life, while still being basically human. The Atrahasis epic begins by explaining that the first human creation happened because the Anunnaki themselves lacked workers. The text says the lesser Anunnaki, called the Igigi, rebelled against the harsh labor forced on them by their superiors. To solve this crisis, Enki suggested creating a new kind of being that could do the needed labor, freeing the divine beings for more important tasks. The epic describes this creation process in a way that suggests advanced understanding of genetic engineering ideas. The goddess, Nintu, working under Enki's direction, is described as mixing earth clay with the blood of a slain god to create the first humans. The text gives exact details. 14 pieces of clay were prepared, 7 to become males, and 7 to become females. Each piece was implanted with divine essence and carried for a set time before being brought to life. The precision of these details suggests real technical procedures, not just myth symbols. The Akkadian version of the creation epic adds more details about the genetic material used. The text names the slain goddess Kingu, described as having intelligence and wisdom that would be passed to the new beings. The epic says this genetic material was carefully processed and purified before being mixed into the clay, suggesting knowledge of genetic isolation and purification methods. The results of this genetic manipulation, according to the Atrahasis epic, produced humans with abilities beyond those of purely natural beings. The text says the first humans lived for several hundred years, had higher intelligence, and could communicate directly with their divine creators. These enhanced abilities slowly weakened over many generations, making periodic intervention necessary to keep the desired traits in human populations. The Egyptian pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom, around 2400 BC, contain similar references to divine beings that closely match the Sumerian Anunnaki hierarchy. The texts describe beings called Nijeru, often translated as gods, but literally meaning divine principles or watchers who set the basic order of Egyptian civilization. These beings are described as coming down from the sky to rule Egypt during a primeval time called Saptipi, or the first time. The pyramid texts of Unas, written in the burial chamber of the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, clearly mention the Nijeru as beings who came from the sky and established Egypt's throne. The text describes these beings as having knowledge of astronomy, math, and engineering that allowed them to build monuments with extraordinary accuracy. The description of their abilities closely matches the technological powers given to the Anunnaki in Mesopotamian sources. The territorial organization in the pyramid texts shows a divine government system that mirrors the Anunnaki hierarchy. The texts name certain Nijeru as rulers of different regions of Egypt, with Ra ruling the south, Ptah controlling the north, and Thoth overseeing the central Nile Valley. This matches the Mesopotamian system where Anu, Enlil, and Enki ruled separate lands. The pyramid text known as the Cannibal Hymn gives disturbing details about the relationship between the Nijeru and humans. It describes the pharaoh as consuming the divine essence of these beings to gain their knowledge and powers. This consumption is described not as symbolic, but as a real transfer of genetic or technological enhancement that let human rulers use divine authority. Architectural evidence from Egyptian pyramid complexes supports the idea that the Nijeru were technological beings, not just myths. The accuracy of pyramid building, especially the Great Pyramid at Giza, shows engineering skills beyond known ancient technology. The mathematical relationships built into pyramid measurements suggest access to advanced geometry that matches the sophisticated knowledge linked to the Sumerian Anunnaki. The underground chambers found under the Giza Plateau show building techniques similar to those at Mesopotamian sites connected to the Anunnaki. These chambers, explored by teams led by archaeologist Mark Lenner, contain granite blocks fitted with precision measured in fractions of a millimeter. The accuracy needed suggests advanced cutting and shaping tools, with no match in standard ancient technology. The astronomical alignments of Egyptian monuments show coordination with Mesopotamian sites, suggesting organized planning across huge distances. The alignment of the Giza pyramids matches important star positions in Mesopotamian astronomy, suggesting both civilizations got their astronomical knowledge from the same sources. This coordination also includes the timing of building projects, which seems synchronized with celestial events important to both Egyptian and Mesopotamian divine hierarchies. The passing of ancient Mesopotamian traditions into Hebrew literature becomes clearest when closely studying the first book of Enoch, which preserves detailed stories of divine beings whose traits and actions match those in Sumerian cuneiform tablets. The Enochic tradition, dating to about the 3rd century BC but based on much older oral sources, describes a group of celestial watchers whose rebellion and punishment closely match Mesopotamian stories of the Apkallu and their later removal from human society. The opening chapters of 1 Enoch describe 200 watchers who came down to Mount Hermon in the days of Jared, Enoch's father. Led by figures named Samjaza and Azazel, these beings are described as making a binding oath to break divine commands by taking human wives and teaching forbidden knowledge to humans. The number 200 matches Mesopotamian administrative records from Nippur that describe exactly 200 Agi lesser divine beings who served under the main Anunnaki leadership before rebelling against authority. The Aramaic pieces of 1 Enoch found among the Dead Sea Scrolls of Qumran give the earliest written evidence for these traditions, with some pieces dating to the 2nd century BC. These manuscripts preserve detailed lists of watcher leaders and their areas of knowledge, creating a classification of forbidden knowledge that directly matches the domains of the Sumerian Apkallu. Samjaza, described as the chief watcher, taught humans enchantments and root-cutting, which matches Mesopotamian traditions of Adapa's mastery of natural forces and farming methods. Azazel, the Secondrink watcher, is highlighted for teaching metallurgy and weapon-making. The text says Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and taught women to use antimony, eye paint, and precious stones. This knowledge transfer matches Sumerian accounts of Uana and Emiduga, who are credited with introducing metalworking and craftsmanship to early human civilizations. The parallel includes specific methods, because both traditions describe mining methods, purification, and alloy making that changed primitive societies into advanced urban centers. The Enochic story centers on Mount Hermon, on the border of modern Lebanon and Syria. This mountain, rising to 2,814 meters above sea level, had strategic importance because it controlled ancient trade routes between Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean coast. Archaeological surveys of Mount Hermon by the Israel Antiquities Authority have found large remains of ancient religious structures, including huge stone circles and megalithic structures that are older than known historical settlements in the area. The summit contains ruins of a temple complex built with techniques similar to those at Mesopotamian sites linked to the Anunnaki. Some foundation stones, weighing more than 20 tons, are fitted together with precision that requires advanced engineering. The alignment of these structures matches astronomical events important in Mesopotamian sky observations, suggesting coordination between Mount Hermon's religious activities and the divine hierarchies described in cuneiform literature. The Enochic focus on Mount Hermon as the Watcher's landing place matches Mesopotamian accounts of sacred mountains as meeting points between sky and earth. The Sumerian idea of the Ekher, meaning mountain house, referred to certain high places where divine beings kept permanent installations to communicate with their cosmic superiors. Ziggurat complexes across Mesopotamia were built as artificial mountains to copy the role of natural sacred peaks like Mount Hermon. The knowledge credited to the Enochic Watchers covers the same areas described in Sumerian texts about the Apkallu. Berakal taught astronomy and watching the heavenly bodies, while Kakabal taught interpreting star signs and calculating sky cycles. These teachings match Mesopotamian traditions of Megalama and Mebuluga, who set the mathematical foundations for tracking planet movements and predicting eclipses. The knowledge passed by the Watchers included methods unknown to Bronze Age civilizations. The Enochic texts described the revealing of ironworking methods that would not become common in the ancient Near East until centuries later. This anachronism suggests the traditions in 1 Enoch came from sources with advanced metallurgical knowledge in times when humans did not yet have these methods. The magical practices taught by the Watchers include divination methods that match those in Mesopotamian ritual texts. Armos taught how to undo enchantments, while Tamiel taught astronomical divination and interpreting celestial signs. These practices require exact math and astronomy knowledge that matches the advanced systems developed by Mesopotamian priests under Apkallu guidance. The punishment story in 1 Enoch provides key parallels to Mesopotamian stories of divine rebellion and banishment. It says the Watchers were bound in the valleys of the earth and forced to watch the destruction of their children before facing final judgment. This matches Sumerian traditions about the banishment of certain Apkallu after breaking divine rules about dealing with humans. The Mesopotamian text called the Bid Siri describes a similar punishment for divine beings who went beyond their authority with human populations. These beings were removed from their offices and confined to certain places where they could no longer influence human progress. The parallel also includes the exact nature of the punishment being forced to watch the results of their unauthorized actions. The Watchers' children, described in 1 Enoch as giants called Nephilim, match Mesopotamian stories of hybrid beings made through unauthorized genetic manipulation. The Sumerian text called the marriage of Mardu describes the creation of beings with both divine and human traits, but seen as abominations by the main divine authorities. These beings are shown as strong and intelligent, but missing the spiritual traits needed to fit properly into either divine or human society. The destruction of these hybrids by a great flood is a shared element in both Enochic and Mesopotamian traditions. The flood story in 1 Enoch describes divine action to remove corrupted bloodlines created by unauthorized mixing of celestial and earthly genetic material. This matches Mesopotamian flood traditions in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic, which describes similar divine decisions to reset human civilization through catastrophe. Saving certain human bloodlines through the flood is another parallel between Enochic and Mesopotamian traditions. Both accounts describe certain individuals who got early warning and detailed instructions to survive. Noah in the Enochic tradition matches Utnapishtim in Mesopotamian stories, with both receiving technological knowledge needed to build survival vessels and preserve chosen genetic material through the disaster. The post-flood time in both traditions involves rebuilding human civilization under changed divine supervision. The Enochic texts say certain Watchers stayed active in human affairs, even though direct intervention was mostly forbidden. These authorized Watchers gave limited technological help, while following strict rules to prevent repeating earlier unauthorized acts. Language connections between Enochic and Mesopotamian traditions go beyond themes and include exact words and ideas. The Aramaic term used in 1 Enoch for Watchers comes from roots traceable to Akkadian. The Hebrew Nephilim matches the Sumerian Anunnaki in meaning beings who came down from heaven to earth. The transfer of these traditions from Mesopotamian to Hebrew sources seems to have happened through several paths during the Babylonian exile. Jewish communities living in Mesopotamia in the 6th century BC would have had access to cuneiform libraries that preserved ancient traditions about the Anunnaki and Apkallu. Blending these traditions with Hebrew religious ideas produced a unique viewpoint found in 1 Enoch. The technological knowledge described in both traditions includes specific methods that ancient civilizations could not have developed through normal progress. The astronomical calculations in both Enochic and Mesopotamian sources show understanding of celestial mechanics that needed advanced math tools and observation equipment. The metallurgical processes in both traditions include chemical procedures not rediscovered until much later. The building knowledge credited to both the Watchers and the Apkallu includes techniques found at archaeological sites across the ancient Near East. The precision stone-cutting methods described match physical evidence of places like Baalbek in Lebanon, where foundation stones weighing hundreds of tons are fitted together with gaps measured in millimeters. These methods require tools and techniques beyond standard ancient abilities. The math knowledge in both traditions includes geometric rules not formally recognized until classical Greek times. The proportional relationships described in both the Gnostic and Mesopotamian texts appear in the layouts of ancient monuments throughout the region, suggesting real use of advanced math concepts by builders working under divine guidance. The medical knowledge credited to the Watchers includes pharmaceutical methods for making complex chemical compounds from minerals and plants. These preparations are described as working better than normal herbal remedies, suggesting understanding of chemical processes not formally recognized until modern pharmacology developed. Ancient Egyptian records preserve detailed stories of a primeval time called Zaptipi, the first time when divine beings set up the foundations of pharaonic civilization. The Turin King list, a papyrus from the reign of Ramesses II but based on much older sources, clearly mentions rulers who governed Egypt before the first human dynasties. These divine monarchs, described as Norway god kings, are recorded as ruling for thousands of years and building the basic institutions that would define Egyptian civilization for millennia. The Turin Papyrus, found by Italian explorer Bernardino Drovetti in 1822, gives a timeline that begins with Ptah's rule, followed by Ra, Shu, Jeb, Osiris, Seth, and Horus. Each divine ruler is credited with introducing certain technologies and administrative systems that changed the Nile Valley from scattered settlements into a unified kingdom. The papyrus says Ptah ruled for 9,000 years and established the rules of architecture and metallurgy that later shaped Egyptian building. Manetho's Egyptiaca, written in the 3rd century BC while he served as high priest at Heliopolis, gives more details about the Zaptipi period that support the Turin King list. Manetho's account, kept in fragments by later writers like Josephus and Eusebius, describes the divine rulers as beings with knowledge of astronomy, math, and engineering far beyond human ability. The text says these rulers created the calendar, developed hieroglyphic writing, and formed the architectural rules used for temple building throughout Egyptian history. The connection between Manetho's divine rulers and the Mesopotamian Anunnaki becomes clear when comparing their roles and abilities. Ptah's role as creator and master craftsman closely matches Enki's role as the Mesopotamian figure responsible for technology and genetic manipulation. Both are described as shaping matter by divine rules and teaching humans the basic arts of civilization. Ra's rule over the sun and his position as supreme ruler closely matches Anu's role as head of the Mesopotamian hierarchy. Both are shown as guarding cosmic order while assigning duties to lower divine beings. The astronomical knowledge credited to Ra in Egyptian sources matches the celestial expertise given to Anu in cuneiform texts, including predicting eclipses and calculating planet movements with extraordinary accuracy. The government structure described for Zaptipi in Egyptian sources shows organizing ideas like those in Mesopotamian accounts of Anunnaki rule. The Palermo stone, a basalt stele from the 5th dynasty, preserves records of divine rulers that show a systematic approach to land management and resource distribution. It explains how each divine ruler controlled certain regions while coordinating activities across the whole Nile Valley through a network of lower administrators. Archaeological evidence from Hierakonpolis in Upper Egypt near modern Edfu supports the existence of advanced technology in the pre-dynastic period. Excavations by James Quibell and Frederick Green between 1897 and 1899 found objects showing advanced metallurgy, astronomy, and water engineering that came before the first pharaonic dynasties by centuries. The famous painted tomb, Tomb 100, contains wall paintings showing beings whose traits match Mesopotamian descriptions of the Anunnaki. These figures are shown as taller than normal humans, wearing special headgear that looks technological instead of ceremonial, and holding objects that look like advanced tools or instruments. The art style and symbols in these paintings show clear influence from Mesopotamian image traditions, suggesting direct cultural contact between pre-dynastic Egypt and the Tigris-Euphrates Valley civilizations. Naqada culture artifacts found throughout Upper Egypt show technological abilities that seem to appear fully formed rather than slowly developing. The Naqada II period, dating to about 35,003,200 BC, produced pottery decorated with astronomical designs, showing detailed knowledge of star motion and planet cycles. Study by archaeoastronomer Julio Magli found mathematical relationships in these designs that match Mesopotamian astronomical calculations preserved on cuneiform tablets. Metal objects from Naqada sites include copper and gold items showing advanced alloy techniques and precision manufacturing. The Pitt Rivers Museum's collection of Naqada metalwork includes copper tools showing evidence of advanced smelting and quality control measures that were not supposed to exist in pre-dynastic Egypt. The chemical makeup of these objects suggests access to ore sources and purification methods, similar to those described in Mesopotamian texts about knowledge transmitted by the Apkallu. Shared images between early Sumerian cylinder seals and pre-dynastic Egyptian artifacts provide strong evidence for direct cultural transmission. The serpent symbol appears strongly in both traditions with the same meaning and in similar situations in both cultures. The Mesopotamian cylinder seal called the Temptation Seal in the British Museum shows a tree between two seated figures with a serpent behind one figure. This scene appears almost the same in pre-dynastic Egyptian artifacts, including ivory knife handles from Jebel el-Iraq dating to about 3300 BC. Bird symbolism shows even more exact parallels. The Mesopotamian Anzu bird, described in cuneiform texts as a divine being capable of flight and possessing technological knowledge, appears almost the same as the Egyptian Bennu bird. Both are linked to solar symbolism, technological knowledge, and the ability to move between sky and earth realms. The consistency of these images across cultures suggests a shared source rather than separate invention. The Abydos king list carved on the walls of Seti's temple at Abydos during the 19th dynasty includes mysterious early entries that seem to match Mesopotamian records of antediluvian rulers. The list starts with archaic hieroglyphs and names of rulers not found in other Egyptian sources. These early entries describe extremely long reigns and credit these rulers with technological achievements that match those given to Mesopotamian pre-flood kings. The timing calculations in the Abydos king list suggest the earliest rulers governed Egypt during periods matching the antediluvian period in the Sumerian king list. The math relationships between reign lengths in both sources suggest coordination between Egyptian and Mesopotamian time systems, stretching back to the earliest recorded times. This coordination suggests communication between the divine hierarchies governing both regions and shared planning for human civilization. The hieroglyphic inscriptions with the earliest Abydos entries include symbols that do not appear in normal Egyptian writing, but match cuneiform signs used in Mesopotamia for divine beings. The presence of these foreign symbols in official royal inscriptions suggests the earliest rulers had knowledge and authority from outside the Nile Valley. The symbols match Mesopotamian signs for the Anunnaki and Apkallu, suggesting a direct connection between Egyptian divine rulers and Mesopotamian celestial hierarchies. The technological knowledge shown in pre-dynastic Egyptian sites includes water engineering that matches Mesopotamian systems linked to Enki and the Apkallu. The Fayum Depression southwest of modern Cairo shows evidence of advanced water management systems that are thousands of years older than known Egyptian engineering. These systems include underground channels cut through solid rock with precision, requiring advanced cutting tools and surveying equipment. The astronomical alignments in pre-dynastic Egyptian monuments show coordination with Mesopotamian sites, suggesting centralized planning across huge distances. The stone circle at Nabta Playa in the Nubian desert, dating to about 4800 BC, includes star alignments that match those used in Mesopotamian astronomical observations. The accuracy needed for this suggests advanced communication methods and shared astronomical records. Genetic evidence from pre-dynastic Egyptian mummies shows traits that set them apart from later Egyptian populations. Analysis by the German Mummy Project found genetic markers in pre-dynastic remains that are closer to populations from the ancient Near East than to indigenous African groups. These genetic patterns suggest people moving from place to place or direct help that brought outside genes into the Nile Valley during the time before dynasties. The building methods shown in early Egyptian construction include stone cutting ways that match those found in Mesopotamian places connected with the Anunnaki. The huge stone structures of Saqqara, which came before the famous step pyramid by several hundred years, show perfect fitting in massive stone weights that need advanced building skills. The building methods used at these places match techniques described in Mesopotamian writings as having been taught by divine teachers. The math knowledge hidden in early Egyptian monuments includes geometry rules that appear in Mesopotamian building layouts connected with divine building projects. The size relationships found in early Egyptian temple foundations match those described in cuneiform texts as divine building rules revealed by the Apkallu. These math constants appear the same way in both cultures, suggesting the passing along of standard building knowledge from common sources. The language connections between early Egyptian and Mesopotamian cultures go beyond shared pictures to include common words for technology and government ideas. The Egyptian word netjer used to name divine beings comes from roots that match the Mesopotamian agigi, while Egyptian building words show clear roots from Sumerian and Akkadian technical vocabulary. These language matches show ongoing cultural contact and knowledge sharing between the two regions during the early times of both civilizations. The keeping of Mesopotamian flood stories in Egyptian sources provides more proof for shared historical experiences between these cultures. The Egyptian text known as the Admonitions of Ippur describes a great disaster that destroyed earlier civilizations and required the rebuilding of human society under divine guidance. This account matches Mesopotamian flood stories in specific details, including the saving of selected individuals and the revealing of new technologies needed for after-disaster rebuilding. The medical knowledge kept in early Egyptian sources includes drug-making techniques that match those described in Mesopotamian texts credited to divine instruction. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, though dating to a later time, keeps medical knowledge that shows understanding of body principles and surgical procedures that go beyond normal ancient abilities. The advanced nature of these techniques suggests passing along from the advanced knowledge systems established during the ZTP period. The coming together of flood stories across ancient civilizations reveals a disaster event so powerful that it completely changed human awareness and technology development. The Sumerian account of Sutra kept in the broken tablets from Nippur dating to around 2100 BC provides the earliest written record of this worldwide disaster. The cuneiform text describes Sutra as a priest king of Shuruppak who received direct warnings from Enki about a coming flood designed to wipe out human civilization. Unlike later flood stories that focus on divine anger, the Sumerian version presents the disaster as a planned decision by the Anunnaki Council to reset human development after unauthorized genetic experiments had corrupted the original human template. The Sutra story contains technical details for survival that suggest advanced engineering knowledge, rather than simple boat-building techniques. The tablet pieces describe a vessel built according to exact math ratios with specific instructions for waterproofing using bitumen and pitch applied in carefully calculated layers. The text shows that Sutra received detailed plans that included compartment schemes, airflow systems, and storage setups optimized for long-term survival at sea. These details show understanding of shipbuilding principles that would not be formally recognized until much later historical times. The Akkadian version, kept in the Epic of Gilgamesh, expands upon the Sumerian account through the character of Utnapishtim, whose name means he who found life. The 11th tablet of the epic, discovered in Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh, provides additional details about the flood's length and the technological help provided by Enki. Utnapishtim's account describes receiving not only building plans, but also navigation instruments and weather prediction methods that enabled him to survive conditions that destroyed all other human settlements. The Gilgamesh version introduces elements that suggest the flood was not just a natural disaster, but involved technological involvement by the Anunnaki. Utnapishtim describes how Enlil unleashed the weapons of the storm, and how the Igigi lit up the land with their lightning. The text shows that weather manipulation technology was used to create unprecedented rainfall and storm conditions that exceeded natural weather events. The description of the flood's beginning includes references to the dikes of the heavens being opened and the foundations of the earth being torn up, suggesting coordinated attack on both atmospheric and geological systems. The archaeological proof for disastrous flooding in Mesopotamia during the early 3rd millennium BC provides physical confirmation of these written accounts. Excavations that are conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934 uncovered a sterile clay layer about 8 feet thick that separated earlier cultural deposits from later Sumerian civilization. This layer, dated to around 2900 BC through layer analysis, represents a flood event of extraordinary size that covered the entire southern Mesopotamian plain to depths that would have eliminated all surface settlements. Similar flood deposits have been identified at Kish, Uruk, Lagash, and Shuruppak, showing that the disaster affected the entire region at the same time. The uniformity of these deposits across such a vast geographical area suggests that the flooding resulted from coordinated causes, rather than local weather events. The sediment composition includes materials that came from sources hundreds of kilometers away, showing water speeds and volumes that exceeded anything produced by normal river flooding. The Shuruppak excavations conducted by German archaeologist Robert Koldewey revealed evidence of hasty abandonment before the flood event. Houses contained valuable objects left in place, suggesting that the inhabitants received little warning before the disaster struck. However, certain buildings show evidence of deliberate preparation with sealed chambers containing cuneiform tablets and artifacts that appear to have been specifically preserved for post-flood recovery. These prepared caches match the written accounts describing how selected knowledge was preserved through divine help. The worldwide distribution of flood stories across cultures that had no apparent contact with Mesopotamian civilization shows that the disaster affected regions far beyond the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. The Hindu Puranas describe Manu's survival of a great flood through divine help from Vishnu, who appeared as a fish to guide Manu's vessel to safety. The Puranic account includes technical details about the construction of the survival vessel that match the specifications given to Sutra and Utnapishtim, suggesting they came from common technological sources. The Aztec legend of Coxcox describes a great flood that destroyed the fourth sun, with Coxcox and his wife Xochiquetzal surviving in a vessel that was guided by divine beings to Mount Coyucan. The Mexican account includes descriptions of advanced warning systems and technological help that mirrored the Mesopotamian stories. The consistency of these details across cultures separated by vast distances and time periods shows that the flood event was truly global in scope and involved coordinated help by technologically advanced beings. The Chinese flood legends kept in the Shujing describe the great efforts to control disastrous flooding that lasted for generations. The Chinese accounts include detailed descriptions of hydraulic engineering projects that required advanced math calculations and construction techniques. These projects involved the creation of channels and reservoirs that redirected floodwaters, according to precise land surveys, suggesting access to sophisticated surveying equipment and water modeling abilities. The keeping of knowledge through the flood represents one of the most important aspects of these stories, as it explains how advanced technological information survived the disaster to influence post-flood civilizations. The Sumerian account describes how Enki instructed Sudra to preserve not only human and animal life, but also the divine decrees that contained the basic principles governing civilization. These included math constants, astronomy data, metal-making formulas, and building specifications that would be essential for rebuilding human society after the waters went down. The Mesopotamian text known as the Instructions of Shuruppak provide specific details about the knowledge-keeping protocols put in place before the flood. The text describes how selected individuals were trained in memory techniques that enabled them to keep vast amounts of technical information without written records. These human libraries were spread across different geographical regions to ensure that the knowledge would survive even if some keeping sites were destroyed during the disaster. The Apkallu played crucial roles in the knowledge-keeping effort. According to multiple Mesopotamian sources, the text known as the Seven Sages describes how each of the 7 primary Apkallu was assigned responsibility for keeping specific domains of knowledge. The text shows that these beings possessed technological methods for encoding vast amounts of data into compact formats that could survive environmental destruction. The physical keeping methods described in Mesopotamian sources included the creation of underground storage places equipped with environmental controls that protected stored materials from flood damage. The Babylonian text, when Anu the Sublime, described sealed chambers carved into bedrock and fitted with drainage systems that prevented water from getting in. These chambers contained not only written records, but also technological artifacts and material samples that would enable rapid rebuilding of pre-flood abilities. The post-flood appearance of advanced civilizations in multiple regions shows the effectiveness of these keeping efforts. The sudden appearance of sophisticated urban centers in Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China during the 3rd millennium BC matches in time with the Mesopotamian flood event and suggests coordinated re-establishment of human civilization by surviving Apkallu and their human partners. The technological abilities shown by these early civilizations exceed what should have been possible for societies rebuilding from disastrous destruction. The Egyptian flood traditions kept in the pyramid texts describe Thoth's role in keeping divine wisdom through a great flood that came before the establishment of pharaonic civilization. The texts show that Thoth, whose characteristics match closely to the Mesopotamian Enki, maintained archives of essential knowledge in sealed chambers beneath sacred sites throughout Egypt. These archives contained astronomy calculations, math formulas, and technology specifications that enabled the rapid development of Egyptian civilization following the disaster. The pyramid texts of Pepi II describe how Thoth gathered the writings of the gods and kept them in the house of books before the great flood covered the land. The text shows that this keeping effort involved not only written records, but also the training of selected priests and advanced knowledge systems that could be passed down orally across generations. These priest initiates served as living libraries who could rebuild technological abilities, even if physical archives were destroyed. The Hermetic texts attributed to Thoth in his Greek form as Hermes Trismegistus keep detailed accounts of pre-flood technological abilities and the methods used to keep this knowledge through disastrous periods. The Emerald Tablet describes principles of matter manipulation that match abilities attributed to the Mesopotamian Apkallu, while other Hermetic works provide specific instructions for rebuilding advanced technologies using basic materials and tools. The technological knowledge kept through the flood included metal-making techniques that enabled rapid advancement in tool-making and construction abilities. The post-flood civilization showed immediate access to bronze-working methods that typically required centuries of gradual development. The precision and sophistication of early bronze artifacts from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley showed that metallurgical knowledge was kept intact through the disaster, rather than being rediscovered through trial and error. The astronomy knowledge kept through the flood enabled post-flood civilizations to establish accurate calendar systems and predict celestial events with remarkable precision. The Mayan calendar system, the Egyptian civil calendar, and the Mesopotamian astronomy tablets all show understanding of celestial mechanics that required sophisticated math calculations and long-term observation data. The consistency of these systems across different cultures suggests they came from common kept sources rather than independent development. The building knowledge kept through the flood appears in the sudden appearance of huge stone construction techniques across multiple civilizations during the early 3rd millennium BC. The precision stone-cutting methods used at sites like Sacsayhuman in Peru, the Giza Plateau in Egypt, and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey show access to advanced tools and techniques that survived the disastrous period. These construction methods appear fully developed, rather than showing gradual evolution from simpler techniques. The math knowledge kept through the flood included geometry principles that appear in the building layouts of early post-flood civilizations. The size relationships found in Egyptian pyramids, Mesopotamian ziggurats, and Indus Valley urban planning show understanding of advanced math concepts that required sophisticated theoretical development. The consistency of these math principles across different cultures shows keeping from common sources rather than independent discovery. The medical knowledge kept through the flood included surgical techniques and medicine preparations that exceeded normal ancient abilities. The Edwin Smith Papyrus and similar medical texts from other early civilizations show understanding of body principles and treatment methods that suggest keeping of advanced medical knowledge from pre-flood sources. The sophistication of these medical systems shows that healing knowledge was among the priority information kept by the Apkallu. The farming knowledge kept through the flood enabled rapid development of intensive farming systems that supported large urban populations. The irrigation techniques used in early Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Indus Valley civilizations show understanding of hydraulic principles that required advanced engineering calculations. These systems appear immediately after the flood period in fully developed form, suggesting keeping of complete farming technologies, rather than gradual redevelopment. The language proof for knowledge keeping appears in the technical vocabulary shared across early post-flood civilizations. Terms for advanced technologies, math concepts, and astronomy events show common roots across languages that had no apparent historical contact. This shared technical vocabulary shows that kept knowledge was passed along using standardized terminology that maintained consistency across different cultural contexts. The genetic proof for selective keeping appears in the distinctive characteristics of ruling dynasties in early post-flood civilizations. Archaeological analysis of royal remains from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and other early civilizations reveals genetic markers that distinguish these individuals from general populations. These genetic patterns suggest that the keeping effort included not only technological knowledge, but also specific human bloodlines that carried enhanced abilities necessary for rebuilding advanced civilizations. The building revolution that transformed the Mesopotamian landscape during the 4th millennium BC represents far more than religious expression. It created a systematic network of communication installations designed to maintain contact between earthly administrators and their celestial supervisors. The ziggurats that dominated Sumerian city-states functioned as artificial mountains, copying the sacred peaks where divine beings had first established contact with human civilization. These massive structures incorporated sophisticated sound properties, astronomy alignments, and geometric proportions that enabled them to serve as technological interfaces between earthly and cosmic domains. The Anu ziggurat at Uruk, dating to around 3200 BC, shows construction techniques that exceed normal ancient building abilities. The structure rises in 7 distinct levels, each oriented to specific stellar configurations that were significant in Mesopotamian cosmology. Archaeological analysis conducted by the German Oriental Society revealed that the ziggurat's internal chambers contained sound resonance properties tuned to specific frequencies. Sound tests performed within these chambers show amplification effects that would enable communication across vast distances, suggesting that the builders possessed advanced understanding of sound engineering principles. The foundation platform of the Anu ziggurat uses massive limestone blocks fitted together with precision measured in millimeters. These foundation stones, some weighing over 50 tons, were quarried from sites located hundreds of kilometers from Uruk and transported using methods that remain unexplained by normal archaeology. The math relationships governing the ziggurat's proportions match astronomy constants that appear in later Greek and Egyptian building systems, showing passing along of standardized building principles across ancient civilizations. The internal structure of Mesopotamian ziggurats reveals sophisticated engineering that served functional rather than merely ceremonial purposes. The Temenenki ziggurat at Babylon, described in detail by Herodotus during the 5th century BC, contained a complex system of internal chambers, air shafts, and drainage channels that maintained specific environmental conditions within the structure. Cuneiform texts describe these chambers as houses of the gods, where divine beings could appear in physical form during communication sessions with human administrators. The sound properties of ziggurat chambers show understanding of sound manipulation that matches modern sound engineering principles. The Marduk temple at Babylon incorporated resonance chambers that amplified specific vocal frequencies while dampening others, creating communication conditions that enhanced the clarity of transmitted information. Babylonian ritual texts describe how priests used these sound properties to establish contact with celestial beings, using vocal techniques that activated the ziggurat's communication abilities. The astronomy alignments built into ziggurat design reveal coordination with celestial events that required sophisticated observation abilities. The Nana Ziggurat aligns precisely with the lunar standstill cycle, a complex astronomy event that occurs every 18.6 years, when the moon reaches its extreme northern and southern positions on the horizon. The math calculations required to predict and build in this alignment show access to astronomy data spanning multiple centuries of observations. The stellar alignments of Mesopotamian temples go beyond simple cardinal directions to include complex relationships with star movements that were significant in Anunnaki cosmology. The Enlil Temple at Nippur builds in alignments to the constellation known as the Way of Enlil, which included stars in the northern celestial hemisphere that were associated with atmospheric events and weather control. The precision of these alignments required understanding of precession effects and stellar proper motion that would not be formally recognized until the Hellenistic period. The Ibzu Temple at Eridu represents the building prototype that established the basic principles governing all later Mesopotamian sacred construction. Archaeological excavations conducted by Fude Safer between 1946 and 1949 revealed 17 distinct building levels at the site, with the earliest structures dating to around 5000 BC. These early levels show building sophistication that appears fully developed, rather than showing gradual evolution from simpler building techniques. The Ibzu Temple's foundation extends deep into the earth, reaching the water table that the Sumerians identified as the Abzu, the freshwater ocean beneath the earth that served as Enki's primary domain. The temple's underground chambers were designed to maintain direct contact with this underground water source, using hydraulic systems that regulated water flow according to astronomy cycles. Cuneiform texts describe these chambers as communication centers where Enki could appear to provide guidance and technological instruction to human administrators. The geometric proportions governing Ibzu temple construction use math relationships that appear throughout ancient sacred architecture. The structure's dimensions match astronomy constants including the precession cycle, the lunar month, and the solar year, encoded in size relationships that show advanced math knowledge. These same proportional systems appear in Egyptian pyramid construction and Greek temple design, showing passing along of standardized building principles from Mesopotamian sources. The hydraulic engineering built into the Ibzu temple shows understanding of water management principles that required sophisticated technical knowledge. The temple's underground channels were carved through solid rock using techniques that achieved smooth surfaces and precise slopes, necessary for optimal water flow. The engineering calculations required for this system show access to surveying equipment and math tools that exceed normal ancient abilities. The shared astronomy knowledge between Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomers becomes clear through comparative analysis of their observation records and prediction abilities. The Venus tablets of Amisaduqa, dating to around 1650 BC, keep Mesopotamian astronomy observations that show understanding of planetary cycles with precision that matches Egyptian astronomy texts from the same period. The consistency of these observations across different cultures shows coordination between astronomy institutions that shared common knowledge sources. The precession cycle, requiring about 26,000 years to complete, appears in both Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomy calculations with identical math formulas. The Mesopotamian text known as the Astrolabe of Amisaduqa contains precession calculations that match exactly those found in Egyptian sources, such as the Dendera zodiac. The math sophistication required for these calculations exceeds what should have been possible for ancient civilizations working independently, suggesting access to kept knowledge from earlier sources. The stellar calendar systems developed by Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomers show coordination that goes beyond shared math techniques to include synchronized timing of religious and government activities. The Mesopotamian calendar based on the heliacal rising of Sirius matches exactly the Egyptian Sothic calendar, with both systems using leap day adjustments that maintain accuracy over extended periods. This coordination shows communication between astronomy institutions that enabled synchronized planning across vast geographical distances. The constellation systems used by Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomers show remarkable consistency in star groupings and mythological associations that suggest they came from common sources. The Mesopotamian three ways of heaven, the paths of Anu, Enlil, and Enki match exactly the Egyptian division of the sky into northern, central, and southern regions associated with specific deities. The star catalogs kept in both traditions contain identical stellar positions and magnitude estimates that show shared observation databases. The eclipse prediction abilities shown by both Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomers required understanding of complex math relationships that governed lunar and solar cycles. The Saros cycle, an 18-year period that enables accurate eclipse prediction, appears in astronomy texts from both cultures with identical math formulas. The precision of these predictions shows access to observation records spanning multiple centuries, suggesting institutional continuity that kept astronomy knowledge across extended time periods. The technological instruments described in Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomy texts show shared understanding of observation equipment that enhanced their prediction abilities. The Mesopotamian text known as the Astrolabe of Nabu describes instruments for measuring stellar positions and planetary movements that match devices mentioned in Egyptian astronomy papyri. These instruments used optical principles and mechanical mechanisms that required advanced understanding of physics and engineering. The math techniques used by Mesopotamian and Egyptian astronomers for calculating celestial events show shared knowledge of advanced calculation methods. The BASE-60 numerical system developed in Mesopotamia appears in Egyptian astronomy calculations, while Egyptian geometric techniques for calculating areas and volumes appear in Mesopotamian building texts. This cross-cultural math exchange shows sustained intellectual contact between scholarly institutions in both regions. The temple orientation systems used in both cultures show coordination that goes beyond astronomy alignments to include shared symbolic and functional principles. The east-west orientation of Egyptian temples matches the directional alignments of Mesopotamian ziggurats, with both systems using specific angular adjustments that account for local geographical conditions while maintaining cosmic relationships. The math calculations required for these adjustments show access to sophisticated surveying techniques and geographical knowledge. The ritual calendar systems developed by both cultures show synchronization that enabled coordinated religious and government activities across vast distances. The timing of major festivals in both Mesopotamian and Egyptian calendars matches identical astronomy events, including planetary conjunctions, stellar heliacal risings, and lunar phases. This coordination suggests communication networks that enabled real-time coordination of ceremonial activities between distant temple complexes. The keeping of astronomy knowledge through institutional structures in both cultures shows similar organizational principles that ensured continuity across political disruptions and dynastic changes. The temple schools established in both Mesopotamia and Egypt maintained identical curricula for training astronomopriasts, including math techniques, observation methods, and prediction calculations. The consistency of these educational systems across different cultures shows they came from standardized knowledge sources. The building proof for communication systems within temple complexes reveals technological abilities that enabled coordination between distant sites. The sound properties of temple chambers in both cultures show understanding of sound transmission principles that could help long-distance communication. The geometric relationships governing temple construction use math constants that would enable structural resonance effects capable of transmitting information across extended distances. The metalmaking knowledge required for constructing astronomy instruments appeared at the same time in both Mesopotamian and Egyptian contexts, showing shared access to advanced technological information. The bronze and copper alloys used for precision instruments in both cultures show identical composition ratios and manufacturing techniques that required sophisticated understanding of metalmaking principles. The sudden appearance of these advanced metalmaking abilities in both regions suggests passing along from common technological sources rather than independent development. The optical knowledge shown in astronomy instruments from both cultures shows understanding of light manipulation principles that enhanced observation abilities. The crystal lenses discovered in Mesopotamian archaeological contexts match similar optical devices found in Egyptian temple complexes, with both types showing precision grinding and polishing techniques that required advanced tool-making abilities. The math principles governing lens curvature in both traditions show shared understanding of optical physics. The recording systems used by both cultures for keeping astronomy observations show identical organizational principles and data storage methods. The astronomy diaries maintained by Mesopotamian temple complexes match in format and content Egyptian astronomy records, with both systems using standardized notation methods and measurement units. The consistency of these recording systems across different cultures shows establishment of common protocols for astronomy data collection and keeping. The dissolution of the ancient Mesopotamian temple complexes did not mark the end of the knowledge systems established by the Anunnaki and their human go-betweens. Instead, these traditions went through a systematic transformation that kept their essential elements, while adapting them to new cultural and political contexts. The Babylonian mystery schools that emerged during the Neo-Babylonian period served as the primary vehicles for this passing along, maintaining the astronomy, math, and technological knowledge that had been accumulated over thousands of years of divine-human collaboration. The Babylonian mystery schools operated within the temple complexes of Marduk at Babylon and Abu at Borsippa, where initiated priests kept the most sensitive aspects of ancient knowledge through carefully structured educational programs. The curriculum of these schools, as documented in administrative tablets from the Seleucid period, included advanced math techniques, astronomy calculation methods, and metalmaking formulas that came directly from the knowledge systems established by the At-Kalu. Students went through rigorous training that could extend for decades, learning not only theoretical principles, but also practical applications of technologies that remained far ahead of normal ancient abilities. The initiation processes used by these mystery schools had elements that directly matched the transformation procedures described in Sumerian texts about human enhancement by divine beings. Initiates went through physical and mental conditioning that enhanced their thinking abilities and extended their lifespans beyond normal human parameters. The Greek historian Berossus, himself a graduate of the Babylonian mystery schools, describes these enhancement procedures as involving exposure to specific frequencies of sound and light that activated dormant genetic potential within selected individuals. The math knowledge kept by Babylonian mystery schools formed the foundation for later Hermetic and Gnostic systems that would influence European intellectual development for centuries. The geometry principles encoded in Babylonian astronomy texts appear in virtually identical form in the Hermetic corpus, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, including the math relationships that govern planetary movements and the proportional constants that determine optimal building layouts for sacred structures. The passing along of this math knowledge occurred through direct instruction of Greek students who traveled to Babylon to study under Chaldean masters. The astronomy knowledge maintained by Babylonian schools provided the technical foundation for the astrological systems that became central to Hellenistic and Roman mystery traditions. The precise planetary ephemerides calculated by Babylonian astronomers enabled accurate prediction of celestial events that were interpreted as divine communications in later Hermetic and Gnostic systems. The math techniques used for these calculations, including the BASC60 numerical system and sophisticated interpolation methods, were kept intact through the Pasingulum process and appear in medieval European astronomy texts without change. The metalmaking knowledge kept by mystery schools included alchemical techniques that enabled the production of materials with properties that exceeded normal ancient abilities. The copper and bronze alloys described in Babylonian technical texts show composition ratios and manufacturing processes that required understanding of chemical principles not formally recognized until the modern period. These metalmaking formulas were passed along to Alexandrian scholars who built them into the earliest alchemical treatises, establishing the technical foundation for medieval European alchemy. The transition from Babylonian mystery schools to Alexandrian institutions occurred during the Hellenistic period, when Greek scholars gained access to Mesopotamian temple libraries, following Alexander's conquest of the Persian Empire. The Library of Alexandria became the primary storage place for translated Mesopotamian texts, with scholars like Apollodorus of Athens and Seleucus of Seleucia working to translate cuneiform technical treatises into Greek. These translations kept not only the theoretical content of Mesopotamian knowledge, but also the practical instructions necessary for using advanced technologies. The Hermetic texts that emerged from Alexandria during the Roman period showed direct continuity with Mesopotamian traditions about divine beings and their technological abilities. The Corpus Hermeticum describes beings called daemons, who possess knowledge of natural forces and the ability to manipulate matter according to divine principles. These beings match exactly the Mesopotamian Apkallu in their attributed abilities and their role as go-betweens between celestial and earthly domains. The technological knowledge attributed to these beings includes methods for changing base metals, extending human lifespans, and communicating across vast distances through technological means. The Gnostic systems that developed alongside Hermetic traditions built in Mesopotamian concepts of divine watchers into their cosmological frameworks, though with significant theological changes. The Gnostic archons described in texts like the Apocryphon of John match the rebellious Agigi of Mesopotamian tradition, shown as beings who exceeded their authority and corrupted human development through unauthorized genetic manipulation. The Gnostic emphasis on hidden knowledge and the need for spiritual liberation from material constraints reflects the Mesopotamian tradition of keeping advanced knowledge within restricted circles of initiated individuals. The influence of Mesopotamian watcher traditions on Jewish angelology becomes clear through detailed analysis of post-exilic Hebrew literature and its development of complex hierarchical systems governing celestial beings. The Book of Enoch, written during the Second Temple period, keeps detailed accounts of angelic hierarchies that match exactly the government structures described in Mesopotamian texts about Anunnaki governance. The specific names and functions assigned to archangels in Jewish tradition come directly from Mesopotamian sources, with Michael matching the Mesopotamian Marduk, Gabriel matching Nabu, and Raphael matching Ninurta. The technological abilities attributed to angels in Jewish literature mirrored those assigned to the Mesopotamian Apkallu, including the ability to manipulate natural forces, provide advanced knowledge to selected humans, and maintain surveillance over human activities. The Book of Jubilees describes how angels taught Noah the principles of medicine, astronomy, and agriculture necessary for rebuilding civilization after the flood. These teachings match exactly the areas of knowledge attributed to specific Apkallu in Mesopotamian sources. showing direct passing along of these traditions through Jewish scribal schools. The development of Christian angelology built in Jewish traditions about divine watchers while adapting them to Christian theological frameworks. The Pseudo-Dionysian hierarchy of angels established during the 5th century AD organized celestial beings into 9 orders that match the government levels described in Mesopotamian texts about Anunnaki governance. The specific functions assigned to each order of angels mirrored the territorial and technological responsibilities attributed to different classes of divine beings in cuneiform sources. The Christian tradition of guardian angels comes directly from Mesopotamian concepts of individual divine watchers, assigned to monitor and guide specific human beings. The early Christian text known as the Shepherd of Hermas describes these guardian beings as possessing detailed knowledge of human activities and the ability to provide technological and spiritual help when properly called upon. The methods described for communicating with guardian angels match techniques kept in Mesopotamian ritual texts for establishing contact with personal protective deities. The influence of Mesopotamian traditions on Islamic angelology appears in the detailed descriptions of angelic hierarchies and functions kept in early Islamic literature. The Quran's description of angels as beings created from light who serve as divine messengers matches Mesopotamian accounts of the Igigi as luminous beings who transmitted information between celestial and earthly domains. The specific angels named in Islamic tradition, including Jibril, Mikhail, and Israfil, come from the same Mesopotamian sources that influenced Jewish and Christian angelology. The Islamic tradition of the Watchers, known as Raqib, builds in Mesopotamian concepts of divine surveillance over human activities. Islamic texts describe these beings as keeping detailed records of human actions and possessing the ability to observe multiple locations at the same time. The technological abilities attributed to these beings include methods for instant communication and the ability to manipulate physical matter according to divine will, matching exactly abilities assigned to Mesopotamian watchers in cuneiform sources. The development of Islamic demonology also shows clear influence from Mesopotamian traditions about rebellious divine beings. The Quranic account of Iblis and his followers matches Mesopotamian stories describing the rebellion of certain Igigi against established divine authority. The specific abilities attributed to these fallen beings, including the ability to take various forms and to influence human behavior through technological means, mirror the characteristics assigned to banished Apkallu in Mesopotamian texts. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new connections between ancient Near Eastern civilizations and their shared mythological frameworks, providing physical proof for the passing along of knowledge systems across cultural boundaries. The recent excavations at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey have uncovered huge stone structures dating to around 9500 BC that show construction techniques and astronomy alignments that match those found in later Mesopotamian and Egyptian sites. The precision stonecutting methods used at Göbekli Tepe require tools and techniques that exceed normal Neolithic abilities, suggesting access to advanced technological knowledge that was kept and passed along across thousands of years. The iconographic elements carved into the Göbekli Tepe pillars include representations of beings that match descriptions of the Mesopotamian Anunnaki and Apkallu. These figures are shown as humanoid but taller than ordinary humans, wearing distinctive garments that appear to be technological rather than ceremonial in nature, and carrying objects that look like sophisticated tools or instruments. The artistic style and symbolic content of these carvings show clear continuity with later Mesopotamian iconographic traditions, showing cultural passing along that span thousands of years. The underwater archaeological discoveries off the coast of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean have revealed submerged structures that show advanced building knowledge and construction techniques that came before known civilizations by thousands of years. The Yonaguni monument off the coast of Japan shows precision stone cutting and geometric layouts that match building principles found in Mesopotamian and Egyptian sacred sites. The math relationships governing the structure's proportions include the same astronomy constants that appear in later temple complexes, suggesting they came from common knowledge sources. The genetic studies of ancient populations have revealed patterns of migration and cultural contact that support the written proof for knowledge passing along between ancient civilizations. DNA analysis of remains from early Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Indus Valley sites shows genetic markers that show ongoing contact between these populations, despite the vast distances separating their territories. These genetic patterns match the periods when advanced technological knowledge appears at the same time in multiple regions, supporting the historical accounts of coordinated development under divine guidance. Modern esoteric interpretations of ancient Sumerian texts have created new perspectives on the nature of prehistoric advanced civilizations and their relationship to contemporary human development. Scholars like Zacharias Sitchin and Michael Tallinger have proposed that the Anunnaki represent extraterrestrial beings who established mining operations on Earth and genetically modified human beings to serve as workers. While these interpretations remain controversial within academic circles, they have stimulated renewed interest in Mesopotamian literature and encouraged more detailed analysis of the technological knowledge kept in cuneiform texts. The translation work by contemporary scholars who study ancient languages has revealed previously unknown technical details in Mesopotamian texts that support interpretations of advanced prehistoric technologies. The math tablets from Babylon contain calculation techniques that show understanding of concepts like logarithms, trigonometric functions, and calculus principles that were not supposed to be known until much later historical periods. These math abilities suggest access to knowledge systems that far exceeded normal ancient educational institutions. The astronomy knowledge kept in Mesopotamian texts includes precise calculations of planetary movements and stellar positions that require observation abilities beyond what should have been possible for ancient civilizations. The Venus tablets of Amisaduqa contain predictions of planetary positions with accuracy that matches modern astronomy calculations, showing access to sophisticated observation equipment or alternative methods for getting astronomy data. These abilities support interpretations of the Anunnaki as technologically advanced beings who possess scientific knowledge far beyond ancient human abilities. The metalmaking knowledge described in Mesopotamian technical texts includes alloy compositions and manufacturing processes that produce materials with properties that exceed normal ancient abilities. Recent attempts to replicate these ancient formulas have produced metals with characteristics that approach modern high-performance alloys, suggesting that ancient metalworkers possessed understanding of chemical principles that were not formally recognized until the industrial period. These technological abilities show that prehistoric civilizations had access to knowledge systems that were far more advanced than normal historical models suggest. The impact of these discoveries on contemporary understanding of human development has been profound, challenging normal models of technological and cultural evolution. The proof for advanced knowledge systems in prehistoric civilizations suggests that human development has not followed a simple straight progression from primitive to sophisticated, but rather has involved periods of advanced achievement, followed by disastrous decline and gradual recovery. This cyclical model of civilization development matches the accounts kept in ancient texts about periodic help by advanced beings who provided technological help during critical periods. The keeping of ancient knowledge through secret societies and esoteric traditions has ensured the survival of technological and spiritual information that would otherwise have been lost during periods of civilization collapse. The Masonic traditions that emerged during the medieval period built in geometric and building knowledge that comes directly from ancient temple building traditions, keeping math principles, and construction techniques that enabled the construction of Gothic cathedrals and other building achievements. These traditions maintain continuity with the knowledge systems established by the ancient mystery schools, ensuring that essential information remains available for future rebuilding efforts. The contemporary revival of interest in ancient wisdom traditions has led to new attempts to understand and use the technological knowledge kept in ancient texts. Research groups around the world are working to translate and test the technical instructions contained in Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and other ancient sources, with some success in copying ancient metalmaking processes and building techniques. These efforts show that the knowledge kept in ancient texts represents genuine technological information rather than mythological guessing. The implications of this hidden stream of ancient wisdom for contemporary human development remain profound and largely unexplored. The proof suggests that human civilization has access to knowledge systems that could revolutionize current technological abilities and provide solutions to contemporary challenges in energy production, material science, and environmental management. The keeping and passing along of this ancient knowledge through esoteric traditions ensures that these abilities remain available for use when human civilization reaches the appropriate level of spiritual and technological maturity. The legacy of the Watchers who ruled before Egypt continues to influence human development through the hidden streams of knowledge they established and the institutional structures they created for keeping and passing along advanced information across generations. The mystery schools, religious traditions, and esoteric societies that maintain these traditions serve as guardians of humanity's true heritage, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancients remains available to guide future development and enable the restoration of humanity's original abilities. This ancient wisdom represents not just historical curiosity but practical knowledge that could transform contemporary civilization and restore the partnership between human and divine intelligence that characterized the earliest periods of recorded history.